She walked through the door and didn't say my name. I was sitting in the fourth chair on the left side of the long oak table in the fair weather conference room on the third Tuesday of January, at 4:03 in the afternoon, and Marisol Reyes was explaining the spring symposium budget when the door opened and a woman in a forest green cardigan walked in and stopped in the doorway. She was carrying a leather satchel in one hand and a paper cup of coffee in the other. Her hair was the color it had been the last time I saw it, quiet auburn, pulled back into a low knot at the base of her neck. Her eyes found mine across the room, slate blue, the color of the harbor in November. She looked at me for exactly the length of time it takes to recognize someone you have agreed never to recognize again. Then she looked away and set her satchel down on the chair Marisol had pulled out for her. Marisol said, "Everyone, this is Kate Bellamy. She's joining us for the spring as our visiting professor in English. She'll be sitting in with us today and helping me chair the spring symposium with Henry." There was a small ripple of welcome around the table. Jonas Park, sitting across from me, did not say anything. He was watching me the way Jonas watches anything that has gone quiet without explanation. We went around the table. We introduced ourselves to her by name. Mark Liu, Stephanie McCurry, Carl Wennerland, Pablo Picato, Casey Blake. When it was my turn, I said, "Henry Vance, American History, Reconstruction." She lifted her eyes to mine. She said, "Kate Bellamy, Brontes." That was all. She did not say it was nice to meet me. She did not say she looked forward to working together. She did not say my first name, even though Marisol had used it 3 sentences earlier. I did not say her first name either. Marisol went back to the symposium budget. I looked at the agenda in front of me without seeing it. The radiator in the corner of the room ticked twice and was quiet. Kate Bellamy was sitting 4 chairs away from me with her hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup, and we were both pretending we had never seen each other before in our lives. 22 days earlier, I had asked her to dance at the Yale Club on the 20th floor in front of a wall of presidential portraits, and 3 minutes before midnight she had said the only thing I needed her to say, and at 12:18 in the morning I had watched the elevator doors close in front of her face and stood there in the hallway like a man who had just been given something and had agreed not to keep it. I should have known. The minute Marisol told me 2 days before Christmas that she had pulled a visiting professor from Edinburgh for the spring, I should have known. But she had also told me the name, Kate Bellamy, and I had not known the name then. I had not known any name. That was the point. I had not wanted to go to the Yale Club New Year's Eve gala. I had said yes only because Marisol Reyes had called me at 4 o'clock on the afternoon of December 31st and said Hector had a fever of 101 and would I please be her +1 because she had paid for 2 seats and would not be the only widow at her own table. She said widow. She said it deliberately. Marisol's husband had not died. He was on the couch with a sinus infection. She said widow because she knew I had not been to a black tie event in 3 years, since my divorce had been finalized in a Manhattan courtroom on a Wednesday morning the December before last, and she had been watching me say no to invitations for 15 months. And she had decided, as Marisol decided most things, that I had been left to choose for myself for long enough. So I put on the tuxedo I had not worn since 2022, and I rode the 1 train down to Grand Central, and I walked across Vanderbilt Avenue in a thin coat to 50 Vanderbilt, and a doorman in a green coat held the door for me, and the elevator took me up 20 floors, and Marisol met me on the landing in a black silk dress with pearls she had worn to every fundraiser in 15 years, and she put her hand on my arm and said, "You look like a man who would rather be home, Henry. Try harder." The grand ballroom of the Yale Club is the room you read about in 1920s novels and assume no longer exists. The ceiling rises 3 stories. There are 5 fireplaces. Along the back wall hang the portraits of the 5 United States presidents who were Yale men, Taft and Bush 41 looking faintly suspicious of one another in their gilded frames. The room had been set for 240 guests at 24 round tables, with a small orchestra on a platform under the windows, and waiters in white jackets moving between the tables with trays of crystal flutes. I stood at the bar with a bourbon in my hand and watched the room from the corner, the way a historian watches a battlefield from the wrong century. Marisol was 12 feet away talking to a woman she had known at law school in 1985. I knew almost no one. The Yale Club empties out a particular kind of person on New Year's Eve, alumni who came in from Greenwich, the men who had been on the law review in 1992, women who had raised 3 children and stayed sharper than the husbands they had outlived. I knew the type. I had been the type once, when my wife was still my wife, and we had come to events like this together and stood at bars like this together and gone home together at 11:30 because we were both early sleepers. I was thinking about that exact thing, about the early sleeper I had been, married, when I noticed the woman standing alone at the window. She was wearing a dress the color of deep evergreen. The cut of it was older than the room, the kind of dress that did not need to be looked at, that did not announce itself. Her hair was pulled back loosely. She was holding a glass of champagne in her left hand and a menu card in her right, and she was reading the menu card and to herself at something she had read. That was the detail that stopped me. In 3 years, I had not noticed a stranger laughing alone at a menu card. In 3 years, I had not noticed strangers at all. She looked up. She looked up the way people look up when they feel themselves being watched. Her eyes went around the room and they found me and they did not move. I have thought about that moment more than any other moment of that night. The moment before either of us did anything. She did not smile. I did not look away. She did not look away. The orchestra was playing something Cole Porter had written. The room was crowded behind us. A waiter went past me with a tray. Marisol laughed at something her friend had said. None of it had anything to do with the woman by the window or with me. She lifted the menu card slightly. It was a small gesture, less than an inch, as if she were inviting me to come read whatever had made her laugh. I had not crossed a room to a woman I did not know in 22 years. I crossed it. It took me 11 steps. I counted them. I have counted them many times since. What's funny, I said. She handed me the card. She did not say her name. She did not say hello. I read the line she was pointing at. The kitchen, under the heading of dietary accommodations, had written, "We can prepare most items vegetarian, gluten-free, or to address common allergies. Please notify your server if you have a tragic relationship to dairy." I laughed. I had not laughed at anything in writing in 18 months. She said, "A tragic relationship to dairy. I want to know who wrote that. I want to know what their life looks like." I said, "Probably a Yale undergraduate working the catering office for the holidays." She said, "Then there is hope for Yale undergraduates." We were already inside something, 3 sentences in. I did not know her name. I did not have to know her name. I was holding a bourbon and she was holding champagne, and we were standing 4 feet apart in front of a wall of presidents. She told me her glass was empty before I knew I was going to ask her to dance. We had been standing in front of the menu card for 30 minutes. I had given the card back to her. We had talked the way you talk to a stranger you have decided not to know, which is the most honest way it is possible to talk to anyone, about the orchestra's tempo, about whether the cellist was reading from sheet music or from memory, about the woman in the lavender dress at the next table who appeared to be trying to convince her husband to leave before midnight. Kate noticed the woman before I did. Kate noticed everything before I did. She had the kind of attention that arrives in a room and registers what is in it without announcing the registering. I had not told her what I did. She had not told me what she did. We had agreed, by saying nothing, that we were not going to be those people tonight. She tipped her glass slightly and said, "Empty." I said, "I can fix that." She said, "Or you could ask me to dance." The orchestra had shifted, at some point during our conversation, into something slower. A couple I did not recognize had stood up and were moving in a small square near the platform. The waiters had begun lighting the small candles at every table for the midnight toast. It was 11:31. I said, "Would you dance with me?" She said yes. Then she said, "On one condition." I waited. She said, "I want one dance. Then I want to go back to my hotel by myself. I am leaving New York on Saturday. I am not going to take your number and you are not going to take mine. I do not want to know your name. I want this to be tonight only. I want it to be true that I do not know who you are." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because the disappointment of knowing each other would be worse than what we have now, and because I am tired, and I do not have the energy this year to be hopeful about a stranger I will never see again." I set my glass on the bar. I held out my hand. I said, "All right." She took my hand. Her fingers were warm. We walked across the room together and we stepped onto the polished floor between the orchestra platform and the fireplace, and she put her hand on my shoulder, and I put my hand at her waist, and the cellist began the first measure of something old. I have been a historian for 25 years. I have spent my professional life inside other people's specific moments. I know what it means when a moment is going to last. I knew it on the floor of the Yale Club ballroom at 11:33 on the 31st of December. She danced the way a person dances who has been taught and has chosen to remember it. Her left hand was light on my shoulder. She did not look up at me. She looked over my shoulder, at the room, at the candles, at the woman in the lavender dress who had stopped trying to leave. After the first song, the cellist paused for 2 beats and began something else. A Gershwin, I think, but slower than Gershwin usually is, and Kate did not let go. I did not let go. We danced through the second song, and then through the third. We did not talk. She had set the rules. She had told me what she wanted. We did not need to talk. At 11:58, the orchestra stopped. The room began to gather. Waiters were moving with trays of champagne. The man at the platform took a small handheld microphone and began the countdown. Kate stepped back from me 1/2 step and looked up at me for the first time since we had begun dancing, and she said, "Don't kiss me at midnight. I want this to be one thing. I do not want it to be 2 things." I said, "All right." The room counted down from 10. We stood on the dance floor holding each other's eyes. At 1, the room "Happy New Year," and the orchestra began Auld Lang Syne, and the woman in lavender kissed her husband, and Marisol, somewhere behind me, was being kissed on the cheek by a man I did not know. Kate raised her champagne glass. A waiter had brought us each one without either of us noticing. She said, "To strangers." I said, "To strangers." We drank. We finished the dance through the end of Auld Lang Syne. She set her glass on the edge of the platform. She put her hand on my chest for 1 moment, light, just over the place where my heart was. She said, "Thank you." I said, "Thank you." She walked off the floor. She walked past the bar. She walked across the marble floor of the lobby to the bank of elevators on the far wall. She did not look back. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in. She turned around to face the doors as they began to close. She looked at me across 40 feet of marble floor. The doors closed. It was 12:18 in the morning. I stood in the lobby of the Yale Club for a long time. Marisol found me eventually. She did not ask. She put her hand under my elbow and walked me out into Vanderbilt Avenue. The cold was a wall. We took a cab uptown. I did not say anything. Marisol watched the window. When the cab stopped at her building on Riverside, she turned and looked at me and said, "Henry, whoever she was, hold on to whatever she gave you. It has been a long time since you looked like that." I said, "It was nothing." She said, "Henry, I have known you for 15 years. It was something." She got out of the cab. I went home alone. I poured a glass of water in my kitchen. I stood at the window and watched the river. I did not know her name. I did not know what she did. I did not know where she was staying. I had agreed not to. It had felt, on the dance floor, like a kind of safety I had not felt in 3 years. I did not know that 22 days later she would walk into the Fairweather conference room with a paper coffee cup and a forest green cardigan and a name. I did not know any of it yet. I went to bed at 1:15 and I lay in the dark and I thought about her hand on my chest. Then I slept. For 3 weeks I had thought about her about 6 times a day. I did not let myself name it. I called it residue. I called it the natural result of having spent 3 years not allowing myself to be moved by anything and then being moved by a stranger in a green dress. I thought about it on the 1 train going downtown. I thought about it in the archives. I thought about it twice while making coffee. I thought about it once, badly, in front of a graduate student who had asked me a question about the Reconstruction-era Tennessee Land Redistribution Acts, and who had to ask me again. I had not noticed I had drifted. I told myself that it was over. I told myself that I had agreed it was over. I told myself I had said yes to her terms and had to keep them, even in the privacy of my own kitchen, because keeping them was the deal. I did not know her name. I had agreed not to. The not knowing had felt, when I had agreed to it, like the cleanest thing anyone had let me feel in 3 years. The not knowing felt different now. It felt like a key I had thrown into a river. I was sitting at the long oak table in the Fairweather conference room at 4 o'clock on Tuesday the 21st of January when Marisol Reyes set her hands on the table and said, "I want to introduce the last item on the agenda. Kate is meeting us here at 4:15. She's our visiting professor for the spring from Edinburgh, replacing Tom Wallace on his sabbatical. She'll be with us through the second week of May. I have already discussed this with Henry. Kate and Henry will be co-chairing the spring symposium." Jonas Park looked at me. Jonas had not been told about the symposium chair assignment. Marisol had told me by email 3 days earlier. I had said yes by email 3 days earlier without thinking about it, because Marisol's emails are not the kind of emails you decline, and because I had not connected the name Kate Bellamy to anyone I had ever met. The name had not been her name to me. The name had been an idea. I looked up at Marisol. I said, "Of course." Marisol said, "Wonderful. She should be here any minute." The door opened at 4:03. I have replayed the next 40 seconds more times than I can count. The slow stop in the doorway, the 2 glances around the room, the recognition, her hand tightening on the strap of her satchel, the recognition again, this time with the specific look of a person who has just discovered that the world has not been listening to her about what she wanted. She crossed the room. She set her satchel down. She did not look at me as she set her satchel down. She greeted Marisol. She accepted the chair Marisol pulled out. She sat down. She looked at the agenda in front of her. Her hand was steady on the paper coffee cup. We went around the table. We said our names to her. When it was my turn, I said, "Henry Vance, American History, Reconstruction." I watched her face for any flicker. None. She had absorbed it already. She was past it. She had decided on the other side of the door, in the second when she had realized who I was, exactly what she was going to do. She said her own name, Kate Bellamy, Brontes, that was all. The rest of the meeting passed in 26 minutes. I did not look at her. I looked at the agenda. I made one substantive comment about the symposium's closing panel and felt very pleased with myself that my voice did not change pitch. Marisol said the symposium needed to find a date for the keynote and asked Kate and me to coordinate. Kate said, "We can discuss that." I said, "I can pull up the room calendar this week." Then Marisol thanked everyone and the meeting ended. I stayed at the table to organize my papers. Jonas had gone. Pablo had gone. Mark and Stephanie had stopped in the hallway to discuss the budget. I was the last person in the room except for Kate. She had not stood up. She was looking at a sheet of paper in front of her with a level of attention that no one had ever applied to a Columbia faculty meeting agenda. I said, "Professor Bellamy." She looked up. I said, "I think we have a working session next Thursday afternoon." She said, "Yes, 3 o'clock?" I said, 3 o'clock. She said, "Your office or mine?" I said, "Yours. You're the visitor." She nodded once. She wrote something in her notebook. She did not write anything that needed writing. She wrote it because she needed to look down at a page for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Henry." I said, "Yes." She said, "I think we have an unusual situation." I said, "We do." She said, "I would like to handle it the way I would handle any other professional situation." I said, "All right." She said, "I think we can do that." I said, "I think we can." I waited. I did not say anything else. I wanted her to be the one to set the next part. She said, "Thursday then." She closed her notebook. She picked up her coffee cup. She gathered her satchel. At the door she paused. She said, "Henry." I said, "Yes." She said, "It was a very nice dance." I said, "It was." She did not say anything else. She walked out into the dim corridor of the 6th floor of Fairweather Hall, and her footsteps got smaller down the long hallway, and then I could not hear them at all. I sat in the empty conference room for a long time. Then I went downstairs to Brownie's Cafe in the basement and I drank a coffee I did not want, and I walked across Morningside Heights in the cold to my apartment on Riverside Drive, and I sat on the couch with my coat on and I tried to think about Reconstruction-era land redistribution, and I thought about Kate Bellamy instead. We had agreed in the empty conference room to honor the pact, inside a colleagueship, without telling anyone, without referring to it again. It was a thing 2 grown people could do. I went to bed at 11. I lay in the dark. I thought about her hand on my chest 3 weeks earlier at the end of one dance. Then I tried to sleep. Her office was 619 Fairweather, The number was hand-painted in gold on the frosted glass of the door, and beneath the number, also in gold paint, a previous occupant had stenciled the name Professor Halpern in the typeface of a 1930s tobacconist. Kate had not removed the name. She had tacked a small white index card beneath the gold paint that read, C. Bellamy, visiting, Halpern on sabbatical. She had drawn a tiny arrow on the card pointing up at the painted name. I knocked at 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. I had walked up the 4 flights from my own office on the 3rd floor instead of taking the elevator because I had wanted the extra minute to gather myself, and because Fairweather's elevator in January smells faintly of wet wool and old steam heat. She said, "It's open." I went in. She had been there for 10 days. She had already done what people do when they intend to belong somewhere. There was a small fern on the windowsill. There was a tea kettle on a low shelf beside 2 mugs. There was a stack of books on the desk that had not come from the Columbia Library. They had come from her own shelf in Edinburgh, the spines slightly soft, with bookmarks pushed deep enough to leave a faint indent on the closed pages. The radiator in the corner was banging the way every radiator in Fairweather Hall has banged since the building opened in 1897. The window behind her desk looked east, and the light at 3 o'clock in mid-January was a low, warm gold across the tweed of her chair. She was wearing the forest green cardigan. She had taken her hair down since the morning. She said, "Sit anywhere except in Halpern's chair. I am not going to sit in his chair. It feels presumptuous." I sat in the wooden chair at the side of the desk. She had pulled out the symposium binder. She said, "I made you a coffee." She handed me a mug. The mug had a small chip on the rim. The coffee was black with 1 sugar, exactly the way I take it. She had not asked. I said, "How do you take yours?" She said, "The same." I said, "That cannot be a coincidence." She said, "It is not." She had paid attention 23 days ago to what I had ordered at the bar. We sat with the binder between us. We worked through the symposium agenda. She had revised the closing panel structure. I had 3 concerns about her keynote slot. We disagreed for 10 minutes about whether to invite a particular Edinburgh medievalist whom she liked and whom I considered a mediocre publisher, and I lost the argument because she was right about the medievalist. We worked, the radiator banged, the light moved across the bookcase behind her. At 3:47 the radiator did its specific Fairweather knock. 3 short bangs, a pause, 2 long bangs, 2 short. She said, "There it is, Charlotte's complaint." I said, "What?" She said, "I have named the radiator after Charlotte Bronte." She always wanted to be heard and was usually being ignored by the men in the building. The radiator and I have a great deal in common. I laughed. I had not laughed in 18 months. I had laughed in Kate Bellamy's presence 3 times now, including twice on December 31st. I noticed it. She noticed it. She looked down at the binder and corrected her posture and pretended not to have noticed it. I pretended back. We worked for another hour. We disagreed about the dinner caterer. We agreed about the conference room. She had a particular handwriting that slanted slightly forward, not the printed handwriting of a person who teaches in front of 200 undergraduates, but the small private handwriting of a person who reads alone and makes notes in books. I watched her write the catering deposit deadline in the margin of the binder, and I thought about how my wife had once had a handwriting like that and had lost it, somewhere around the time she made partner, and had started writing in the careful block letters of a person who suspects she may one day be deposed. At 4:30, Kate looked up at the window. The light had gone. The window now showed her own reflection in the glass. She said, "We should stop. You will hate me by Tuesday if I keep you any longer." I said, "I would not hate you by Tuesday." She said, "All right. You would resent me by Thursday." I said, "Possibly by Wednesday." She said, "I know my limits, Henry." She said my first name without thinking about it. I heard her hear it. I saw her decide to leave it where it had landed. I said, "Kate?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Thursday next week, same time." She said, "Same time." I stood. I put my mug on the corner of her desk. I went to the door. I had my hand on the door when she said, "Behind me, Henry." I turned. She said, "We do not have to be afraid of being good at this together. I am not afraid of it. I do not think you are afraid of it." I said, "I am not afraid of it." She said, "Then we will not be afraid of it." I said, "All right." I walked down 4 flights of stairs because I did not trust myself to be alone inside a small elevator in that exact moment. I walked across the Columbia Quad in the dark. The temperature had dropped to 22 degrees. I walked all the way to Riverside Drive without putting my gloves on, and I did not notice the cold. We had agreed to honor the pact. We had also agreed, in the way two adults agree about something without naming it, that we were going to be good at this. We were going to be honest professionally, and we were going to be honest with each other about being honest professionally, and we were going to leave the rest of it in the room where we had left it on the 20th floor of the Yale Club. That was the plan. I held to it for 6 weeks. The Morgan Library Annual Members' Evening is held on the last Friday of February in the East Room beneath the painted Renaissance ceilings, with 300 members of the New York Humanities Establishment in dark cocktail dress eating salmon under low candlelight. Marisol has bought a Columbia table at the Members' Evening for 15 years, and she had assigned the table that year, 6 weeks into the spring semester, to herself, to Hector, to Jonas Park, to Kate Bellamy, to me, to a Princeton classicist named Anya Pinsky, whom Marisol had wanted to recruit, and to 2 donors named Edwin and Marjorie Strunk, whose family foundation had given Columbia a permanent fellowship in legal history 26 years earlier. I had not wanted to go. Jonas had told me on Thursday afternoon at the West End that he was going to physically appear at my door at 6 o'clock and walk me to the subway if I tried to back out. He had been doing this with increasing frequency since mid-February. Jonas had been protecting me from my own retreat for 2 years and had decided, sometime around the 7th of February, when he had walked into my office and found me staring at a wall, that he was no longer willing. So I went. I rode the 6 train down to 33rd Street, and I walked east to Madison Avenue, and I stood in the soft cold under the awning of the Morgan, and I went in. Marisol's table was at the back, near the marble fireplace. Kate was already there. She was wearing a navy dress and small pearl earrings, and she had her hair up. She was at something Edwin Strunk had said. Jonas was watching her laugh. I sat down across from her. The room hummed. The first course came. The waiters moved between the tables with bottles of indifferent white wine. The director of the Morgan stood up at the front of the room and gave a short speech about acquisitions. We applauded. We sat down. The salmon arrived. Anya Pinsky asked me about Reconstruction, and I answered her badly, because I was aware in my left peripheral vision of Kate's hand on the stem of her wine glass, and of the small ring on her right hand, and of the way her shoulder turned when she leaned in to listen to Edwin Strunk explain his foundation's latest gift. Halfway through the entree, Jonas leaned slightly toward me. He said, very quietly, "Henry." I said, "What?" He said, "You are not actually fooling anyone." I said, "Jonas." He said, "I have known you for 9 years. Marisol has known you for 15. Kate has been at Columbia for 6 weeks. None of us is fooled. The Strunks are fooled. They think you are watching Anya, who is talking to you, instead of watching Kate, who is not. Marjorie Strunk does not pay attention. Edwin Strunk does not pay attention. Everyone else at this table is paying attention." I said, "Jonas." He said, "If you do not say something to her by Easter, I am going to tell Marisol you owe me dinner at Estella." Marisol is going to ask why. I am going to tell her. Marisol is going to be displeased. I said, "I have not done anything that requires saying something." He said, "Henry, you have done something. You have done it since the 3rd week of January. You have done it visibly. You are doing it right now." He went back to his salmon. I did not answer him. I drank the wine. I made conversation with Anya Pinsky about Roman history. I asked Edwin Strunk a question I already knew the answer to. The first course was cleared. The entree was cleared. The waiters brought small slices of chocolate tart and tiny silver coffee cups, and the director of the Morgan stood up again at the front of the room to introduce the keynote, and the room turned politely to face the small stage. I did not turn to face the stage. I looked across the table at Kate. Kate looked back. She had not been looking before. She had been looking at the stage. She had felt me, somehow, in the way people feel themselves being looked at, and she had turned, and she had met my eyes, and she had not looked away. The keynote speaker began. I did not hear her. I heard the applause in the room around me, very distantly. Kate's eyes did not move from mine. She held my eyes for what was probably 4 seconds. It was the longest 4 seconds of my year. Then she looked down at her plate. She turned slightly in her chair so that she was facing the stage. Her shoulder was angled away from me, but the message had landed. I had felt it land. Whatever I had been doing visibly since the 3rd week of January, she had been doing too. She had been doing it from her side of the table. She had been doing it inside the Charlotte Bronte radiator joke, and inside the way she kept making coffee exactly the way I took mine, and inside the small gold paint of the door of office 619, with her handwritten card beneath it. She was in it. Whatever this was, she was in it too. The keynote ended. The room applauded. Jonas leaned toward me one more time. He said, "Henry, by Easter." I said, "Jonas." He said, "By Easter." We left at 10. Marisol kissed me on the cheek at the curb on Madison and got into a cab with Hector. Jonas walked me to the F train at 42nd Street. Kate had said goodnight at the coat check and had gone uptown on her own. I rode the train back to the Upper West Side with my coat in my lap. I got off at 72nd Street. I walked west to Riverside Drive in the snow. The river was black under the lights of the Henry Hudson Parkway. I stood at the railing in front of my building for a long time before going up. I had been a man who had said no to invitations for 2 years. I had been a man whose interior life had been one long, quiet room without anyone in it. Now there was someone in the room. I had agreed not to know her name. I knew her name. I had agreed not to want anything from her. I wanted something from her. I did not let myself name what it was yet. But I could feel it sitting in the corner of the room like a guest who had been waiting for me to finish my conversation with the woman I had once been married to. I went up. I let myself in. I sat on the couch. For the first time in 2 years, I considered what it might mean to ask for something. Before I tell you what I overheard, if this is landing in your chest, a like means everything, because here is where it came apart. It was the third Tuesday in March, 5:48 in the afternoon. I had been in the manuscripts reading room of the Butler Library since 1 o'clock, looking at a folder of letters from a Freedmen's Bureau agent in central Tennessee, and I had walked back across the quad in the soft, late afternoon light and gone up to the 6th floor of Fairweather to drop a draft of the symposium keynote schedule on Kate's desk before going home. The hallway on the 6th floor at 5:48 on a Tuesday in March is one of the quietest places in Manhattan. The Brownies Cafe lunch crowd has gone. The afternoon seminars have ended. Most faculty have gone home or are working in the law library. The radiators tick. The wood floors do their small settling. Her door was open about 4 inches. I was 3 steps from the door when I heard her voice. She was speaking to someone on the phone. I stopped before I knocked. She was saying, I heard the end of the sentence. She was saying, "Fierce." Yes, I confirmed it with the dean last month. I stood still. She said, "The semester here has done what it was meant to do. I have what I came for. I'll fly back the night of the 8th. The farewell dinner is on the 5th. I'm done with classes on the 2nd. The keynote at the symposium is the 28th. The final panel is the 29th. And after that I have a week of meetings and one last lunch with the chair. May 8th, yes. Tell Enel I'll be in the office on the 12th and I will see him for the department retreat the following week. I am very much looking forward to it." There was a small pause. She laughed at something the person on the other end had said. The laugh was warm. It was the laugh I had been carrying around inside my chest for 10 weeks. She used it freely with someone in Edinburgh I had never met. She said, I will, yes. Give him my love." I did not knock. I turned around and I walked back down the hallway. I went down the 4 flights of stairs. On the 2nd floor landing, I almost collided with Jonas Park, who was coming up with a stack of student papers under one arm. Jonas stopped. He looked at me. He said, "Henry." I said, "Jonas." He said, "You look like a man who has just lost a wallet." I said, "I'm fine." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Not now, Jonas." He let me pass. I felt him watching me down the stairs. I went out through the side entrance onto the lower quad. I crossed Amsterdam Avenue against the light. I walked west through Morningside Heights without my coat buttoned. Hood'em. She had known the entire time. She had known when she had walked through the door of the Fairweather conference room on the 21st of January and not said my name. She had known when she had made me coffee the way I took it in office 619 on the first Thursday of February. She had known when she had named the radiator Charlotte. She had known in the East Room of the Morgan Library when she had held my eyes across the table for 4 seconds and then turned her shoulder to the stage. She had known on every single Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock for 10 weeks. She had known when she had asked me at the door of office 619 on the first afternoon not to be afraid of being good at this together. The semester here has done what it was meant to do. I have what I came for. It had been an experiment. Her presence in New York had been a test. The pact she had made with me on the dance floor of the Yale Club had been safe because she would never have to see me again, and she had been offered the chance, through Marisol, who would have meant well and would have known nothing, to come and see whether she could survive the seeing. And she had decided that she could. She had decided to be a professional, and to keep her distance, and to honor what she had set up on the dance floor, and to go back to Edinburgh on the 8th of May. I had been the experiment, the lingering heart that she had walked away from at 12:18 in the morning on the 1st of January in the elevator of the Yale Club. That lingering heart, mine, had been a thing she had needed to test against. She had come to New York to find out whether she could be in the same room with me without doing anything about it, and she had concluded that she could. I sat on a bench on the south end of Riverside Park as the light went out of the river. I had not bought a coffee. I had not brought a notebook. I sat with my hands on my knees and I did the math of my own foolishness for 45 minutes. For 10 weeks I had been moving towards something. She had been holding the line. I had mistaken her holding the line for restraint of the same kind I was practicing, a mutual containment of a thing we both felt and were both choosing not to act on. I had been reading it that way because I had wanted to read it that way. She had been holding the line because she had decided, before she came, that the line was where it was going to stay. I had been one of 2 people in the room. She had been the only one of us who knew the truth of the room. I sat on the bench until I could not feel my hands. The light went amber on the New Jersey side. A jogger went past me. A woman walked a small white dog past me. A boat moved south on the river. I did not move. When I stood up, I had decided something. I had decided that I was not going to let her see this. I was not going to add to her burden. I was not going to make her feel that her plan had not worked, when in fact her plan had worked perfectly. I was going to be a professional. I was going to chair the closing panel of the symposium beside her on the 29th of April. I was going to attend her farewell dinner. I was going to shake her hand on the 8th of May and wish her a safe flight back to Edinburgh and tell her it had been a privilege to work with her. I was going to do this because she had been right 3 months earlier on the dance floor, and I had not understood it then. The disappointment of knowing each other would be worse than what we had had on the floor of the Yale Club on the 31st of December, because what we had had was the only thing it had ever been allowed to be. I walked home. I went up. I sat at my kitchen table. I had agreed, 3 months earlier, to keep a promise to a stranger. I was going to keep it. She did not know that I knew. There was no reason for her to know. She had not seen me in the hallway. The door had been open 4 inches. I had not knocked. I had walked away. So on Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I knocked on the door of office 619, the way I had knocked every Thursday for 8 Thursdays, and she said, "It's open," and I went in, and I sat in the wooden chair beside her desk, and she said, "I made you a coffee," and I said, "Thank you," and we opened the symposium binder. I had decided, on the bench at the south end of Riverside Park on Tuesday evening, that I was going to honor her plan. I was going to be a professional. I was going to be exactly the person she had needed me to be when she had walked through the door of the conference room on the 21st of January and not said my name. So I was. We went through the catering update. We confirmed the AV needs for the keynote. We argued about whether to schedule a coffee break between panels 3 and 4. I won this one because she was tired and I was not, and the small victory was no comfort because the only reason I was not tired was that I had spent the past 40 hours not letting myself feel anything. We talked about her keynote. She had a complete draft. She wanted my notes by the following Monday. I said I would have them by Sunday. I did not look at her any more than I had to. I looked at the binder. I looked at the radiator. I looked at the small fern on the windowsill, which had grown a new frond. She noticed. She did not say anything for the first half hour. She made her case about the coffee break. She wrote down the catering deadline. She tested a new sentence she was drafting for the keynote out loud. A sentence about how Charlotte Bronte had understood, before any of her readers, that the constraints she was writing under were not natural but historical, and that constraint disguised as nature is the most violent kind of constraint there is. She said the sentence. She looked at me for my reaction. I said, "I think it lands." She said, "Henry." I said, "Yes." She said, "Are we all right?" I said, of course, the first lie. 8 Thursdays into our co-chairship, we had not, in all those Thursdays, told each other anything that was not true. I told it because I had decided to. I told it because the alternative was to tell her what I had heard in the hallway on Tuesday, and what I had concluded on the bench at sunset, and what I had decided in my apartment that night about how the rest of the spring was going to go. None of that was hers to carry. None of it was mine to put on her. She looked at me for one long moment. She said, "All right." She closed the binder. She did not close it because we were done. She closed it because she did not know what else to do with her hands. She said, "I have to be honest with you." I said, "Yes." She said, "I do not want to pretend that what I just asked you and what you just answered me are the same answer." I said, "Kate," she said, "I think we have been very good professionally for 2 months. I think we have been good colleagues. I think the symposium is going to be the strongest interdisciplinary event the department has hosted in a decade. I think all of that is true. And I think there is also a different thing that is true, and I have been not saying it because I do not want to say it, and I want to know if I am alone in the room with the not saying of it. I had a choice. I had it for about 3 seconds. I felt the choice the way you feel the edge of a knife. I said, "You are not alone in the room with it." She said, "All right." I said, "And also we are all right. We are going to keep being all right." She looked at me. She said, "You are doing something I do not understand right now." I said, "I am doing the thing I think the two of us agreed to do on the 31st of December. She did not answer me for a long time. She looked out the window at the brick wall of Avery Hall across the courtyard. The light was going. The fern was a small green silhouette against the bricks. She said, "All right." I waited. She did not say anything else. I stood up. I picked up my coat off the chair where I had set it. I said, "I'll have the notes to you on Sunday." She said, "Sunday?" I said, "Kate." She said, "Yes." I said, "Thank you for the coffee." She said, "Henry." I waited at the door. She said, "If you change your mind about what we are doing, about how we are doing it, I want you to know that you are allowed to." I said, "I will not change my mind." She said, "All right." I went out into the hallway. I shut the door behind me. I stood there for one moment with my hand on the door. I went down the 4 flights of stairs. I walked across the quad. I went home. That was the worst hour of the spring, worse than Tuesday on the bench, worse than anything that had been done to me by my ex-wife in the last 6 months of our marriage, worse than any moment I have ever sat through in any room with any person, before or since. She had given me an opening. She had said, in her direct, quiet way, that the door was not closed. She had said, "If you change your mind, you are allowed to." She had said it kindly. She had said it the way a person says the most generous thing they know how to say to another person. And I had said, "I will not change my mind." I had said it because I had heard her on the phone 2 days earlier, and I had decided that the kindest thing I could do for her was to let her have the version of this where she had not been wrong about who I was, the version where she had stayed safe inside her plan, the version where she went back to Edinburgh on the 8th of May, with her decision intact and her work done and her experiment concluded. I went home. I sat on the couch. I did not turn on the lights. For 2 years I had been a man who did not know what he wanted. Now I knew what I wanted, and I had decided not to ask for it. I held to the decision for 36 days. The symposium ran from the 27th to the 29th of April. We held it in the Heyman Center for the Humanities, in the small theater on the 2nd floor with the long Persian rug down the center aisle and the 86 fold-out seats. Kat's keynote was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Tuesday the 28th. The auditorium was not full, it was beyond full. Marisol had advertised the symposium through every channel she knew. The Council on Library and Information Resources had sent 2 officers. The English department had brought 16 graduate students. 3 of Kat's former students from Edinburgh had flown over for the week and were sitting in the 3rd row in clothes that were not quite warm enough for late April. Jonas was in the back row with his arms crossed. I was in the 3rd row, 4 seats to the right of Kat's Edinburgh graduate students. Kat came out at 2:03. She was wearing a dark gray wool dress and a thin gold necklace I had not seen before. She set her notes on the small wooden podium. She looked once at the room. She looked once at me. She did not pause. She spoke for 52 minutes. I have not been in love with very much in my life, with the particular kind of love that involves wanting to listen to a person speak. I was in love with my work that way. I had been in love with my wife that way in the first 6 years of our marriage. I had loved a particular Edmund Wilson essay that way when I was 23. I sat in the third row of the Heyman Center for the Humanities on the 28th of April, and I listened to Kate Bellamy speak about Charlotte Bronte for 52 minutes, and I knew, somewhere around the 7th minute of her talk, that whatever I had done by going home that Thursday afternoon and sitting on my couch with the lights off, whatever calibrated kindness I had thought I was performing, it had been the wrong thing to do. She was talking about a moment in the second to last chapter of Villette. The moment when Lucy Snow receives the letter from M. Paul saying he will return for her. Kate said, Bronte gives Lucy 3 years of waiting, then she gives her the storm, then she gives her 3 options for the ending, 3 readings, all of them in the same paragraph. He returns. He drowns. He returns. She invites you to choose. She refuses, in the final 200 words of her last novel, to tell you which ending you are allowed to have. Kat paused. She looked at the audience. She said, I would like to suggest that Bronte is not refusing to choose. I think Bronte is telling us that 2 of those endings are not real. I think Bronte is telling us that the ending that is real is the one in which Lucy is not the one who decides. She said, I think Charlotte Bronte understood, in 1853, the thing none of her contemporaries understood about women's choice, that the most important choices women had access to in 1853 were not choices to act, but choices to wait. Lucy is given the ending in which she is the recipient of someone else's decision. Bronte makes her wait. She makes us wait. She refuses to tell us whether the wait is rewarded because she is making a claim about waiting. The claim is, women's waiting is not passive. It is the most active thing in this novel. The room was very still. She said, I want to suggest something further. I want to suggest that the question Bronte leaves open is not, does he return? The question Bronte leaves open is, what does it cost a woman to sit in a house at the harbor and not know whether to set the table for 2? That is the question Villette is asking. That is the question Lucy Snow is being asked to inhabit on every page of the final chapter. And that is the question that women's writing in the 19th century is asking, again and again and again, in the gaps between paragraphs, in the silences, in the rooms where women are doing the work of not knowing. She paused. She said, the cost of not knowing is what I want to talk about for the rest of this hour. I sat in the third row and I felt the talk go through me the way a bell rings. She was talking about Charlotte Bronte. She was also talking about herself. She was also, I understood with a kind of slow horror, that I had been in the wrong room of my own life for the past 36 days, talking about us. She had been sitting in a house at the harbor for 10 weeks. She had been doing the work of not knowing whether to set the table for 2. She had asked me, 6 weeks earlier, in the most direct way she knew how, whether I was going to come back, and I had said, I will not change my mind, and she had taken my answer the way Lucy Snow takes the silence of the final chapter. She had absorbed it, and she had not protested, and she had gone on with the work she had come to do, and she had made the decision a woman makes in 1853 and in 2025, which is to keep her own counsel and finish her own book and get on the plane. She finished her talk at 2:55. The room rose for a standing ovation that lasted 94 seconds. I clapped until my hands hurt. I clapped because she had earned every second of it. I clapped because she had given me the answer I had been refusing to give myself. In the small reception in the Heyman Center lobby afterward, with tiny cups of coffee and a tray of cookies from a bakery on Broadway, Jonas walked up to me with a coffee in his hand. He said, She's going to leave, Henry. I said, I know. He said, Are you going to do anything about it? I said, yes. Jonas looked at me. He had been waiting for that yes for 2 months. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, Easter was 3 weeks ago. You owe me dinner at Estella. I said, I'll buy you 2. Kate found me 10 minutes later by the windows that looked out onto Amsterdam Avenue. She had a coffee in one hand. She had not been able to eat anything during the morning panels. Her face was flushed from the talk. She said, Did it land? I said, It landed. She said, I was nervous. I said, It did not show. She said, It always shows. I said, Kate. She said, Yes. I said, I have to tell you something. She said, Now. I said, No, not now. Soon. She said, All right. I held her eyes. I did not look away. I let her see that I had something to say. I let her see that I had decided to say it. She said, very quietly, Henry, the farewell dinner is on the 5th. I am flying back on the 8th. I said, I know. She said, all right. She turned. She walked across the lobby to greet the 2 Edinburgh graduate students who had flown over for the week. She did not look back. I went home that night and I sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours and I wrote, on a single piece of yellow legal paper, the thing I was going to say at her farewell dinner on the 5th of May. I did not write it down to read it aloud. I wrote it down so that I would know I could. The 5th of May was a Monday. Marisol had booked the Crystal Room at Tavern on the Green for 18 people for 6 o'clock. The dogwoods on the path from Central Park West to the entrance were in their last full week of bloom. The trees were a green I had not noticed before. The light at 6 o'clock in early May is the kind of light that makes you feel briefly that the year is not going to end. I walked up from the 72nd Street subway station and I felt the light on my face and I thought about whether I was going to do what I had decided to do or whether I was going to lose my nerve on the threshold of the restaurant. I did not lose my nerve. I had spent a week being ready to lose my nerve. I was not going to lose it. The Crystal Room is the back dining room at Tavern on the Green. It opens onto the Central Park courtyard through tall windows hung with twinkling lights. There is a chandelier the size of a small car. There are mirrors on 3 walls. Marisol had arranged the long table down the center of the room with white tablecloths and small arrangements of white peonies. Kat was seated at the head of the table in a deep navy dress with her hair down. The 2 seats to her right and left were reserved for Marisol and Hector. I was at the long side of the table, 3rd seat from the foot, with Jonas across from me and Mark Liu beside me and Marisol Reyes' best friend from law school across from Jonas. Marisol stood at 6:18 and gave the toast. The toast was brief and exact and warm. Marisol does not give long toasts. She thanked Kate for the symposium. She thanked Kate for the keynote. She thanked Kate for what she called the texture you have given us this spring, which is not something Columbia teaches and which Edinburgh apparently does. There was a small laugh. Marisol raised her glass. We raised our glasses. We drank to Kate Bellamy. Kate said a few words back. She thanked Marisol. She thanked the department. She thanked Henry Vance by name, briefly, and the brief mention by name was the only place in the toast where her voice changed pitch. I do not think anyone else in the room heard it. I heard it. Jonas heard it. Marisol heard it. The first course came. We ate. Conversations broke into the small clusters that conversations break into at long tables. I had a piece of grilled asparagus. I drank 1 glass of wine. I did not eat my salmon. Around 7:22, dessert was being plated at the side station and the room was quiet enough to hear the small kitchen sounds and the soft conversation of the table. Jonas leaned slightly forward. He said quietly, "Are you going to do it or not?" I set down my fork. I stood up. The chair scraped the polished floor of the Crystal Room. The sound was much louder than I had expected it to be. The room turned. Kate's hand went still on the stem of her wine glass. Marisol looked at me with the specific look of a department chair who is bracing herself for what comes next. I did not have the legal paper. I had read it so many times in the past 9 days that I did not need it. I tapped my water glass without meaning to, a small involuntary nervous gesture I have done since I was a graduate student, and the room understood that I was going to speak. I said, "I have to tell you all something I haven't told any of you." I did not look at Kate. I knew she was looking at me. I looked at Marisol. I said, "On the 31st of December last year, I went to the Yale Club New Year's Eve gala as Marisol Reyes +1 because her husband Hector had the flu. I had not been to a black tie event in 3 years. I had not asked anyone to dance in 22 years. At 11:33 that night, I asked a woman I had never seen before to dance with me, and she said yes on the condition that we would not exchange names and would not see each other again. We made an agreement. We danced through 3 songs. We parted at 12:18 in the morning at the elevators on the 20th floor. I rode home with Marisol in a cab, and I did not tell her what had happened, because what had happened had been mine and the woman's. We had agreed it would be ours alone. I looked at the table. I did not look at Kate yet. I said, 3 weeks later, that same woman walked through the door of the Fairweather conference room as our spring visiting professor. Marisol's mouth opened slightly. She closed it again. I said, "We agreed, the woman and I, without speaking about it, to honor the pact. We did not refer to it. We did not act on it. We worked side by side for 4 months. We chaired the symposium. We did our jobs." I said, "I want to tell you all that I have done nothing wrong." I want to tell you that Kate Bellamy has done nothing wrong. I want to tell you that everything that has happened in this department for the last 4 months has been exactly what it has appeared to be, which is two professionals being good at their work. I took a breath. I said, and I want to tell you that on Tuesday of last week, when she gave her keynote on Charlotte Bronte, she said something about waiting. She said that women's waiting in 19th century fiction is not passive. She said it is the most active thing in the novel. And she said that the cost of not knowing, the cost of sitting in a house at the harbor and not knowing whether to set the table for two, is the question that 19th century women's writing is asking, again and again, in the silences. I looked at Kate then. She was crying, very quietly. She had not moved. Her hand was still on her wine glass. Her eyes had not left me. I said, Kate, I am asking you not to set the table for two in a house at the harbor in Edinburgh. I am asking you to set it for two in a house at the harbor here. I should have asked you 6 weeks ago. I should have asked you in February at the Morgan. I should have asked you on the 31st of December at 12:18 in the morning instead of letting the elevator doors close. I am asking you now. I walked across the room. 18 people watched me walk. I stopped behind her chair. I put my hand on the back of it. I said, Kate. She said yes. I said, stay. She reached up. She put her hand over mine on the back of her chair. She did not stand up. She held my hand there on the wood of the chair, and she pulled it slightly forward so that my arm came around the side of her shoulder, and she leaned her head against my forearm for one moment. She said, in a voice I almost did not catch, I have been waiting for you to ask me, Henry. Marisol leaned toward Jonas across the table. She said, very quietly, did you know he was going to do this? Jonas said, no, but I hoped. The room began, very slowly, to applaud. It was a small, embarrassed kind of applause at first, the kind of applause people do not know they are starting. Then it was a real applause. Mark Liu was the first one on his feet. Marisol stood. Hector stood. Jonas stood with his hands above his head and let out a single short bark of laughter and clapped harder than I think he has clapped at anything since his daughter's 8th grade play. I did not let go of Kate's chair. I did not sit down. She did not stand up. We stayed exactly where we were until the applause stopped and the waiters came back with the dessert plates, and the room slowly remembered how to be a room of 18 people at a dinner. We did not eat the dessert. We did not eat anything. We walked out of the Crystal Room at 8:45. We walked through the Central Park courtyard in the soft evening. We walked under the dogwoods. She did not let go of my hand the entire way. We did not need to talk yet. That came later. It is the 3rd Thursday in October, 6 o'clock in the evening, and the light on the 6th floor of Fairweather Hall is the color of weak tea. I am standing in the doorway of Office 619 with 2 cups of coffee in my hands. The brass nameplate on the door reads, Kate Bellamy, Associate Professor, in real engraved letters. The handwritten index card with the arrow is gone. Halpern moved to a smaller office on the 3rd floor last spring and left Office 619 to its actual new tenant. Kate is at her desk in the forest green cardigan. Her hair is in the low knot. She is marking student essays in green ink with her head bent and her left hand holding back a strand of hair that has come loose at her temple. The fern on the windowsill is the size of a small dog. The radiator is doing Charlotte's complaint. On the corner of her desk, in a small black frame, there is a photograph. It is a photograph of the empty grand ballroom of the Yale Club at 11:58 on the night of the 31st of December. I bought the photograph from the Yale Club's archive. It cost me $42 and a phone call to an archivist named Edna who took 12 days to find it. The chandeliers are lit. The presidential portraits are visible along the back wall. The orchestra is on the platform tuning up. The dance floor is empty. Below the photograph, in my handwriting, on a small card I taped to the inside of the frame, there is one line, 3 minutes early. I think I saw you walk in. I bring the coffee in. I set hers on the corner of the desk near the frame. I sit down in the wooden chair I have sat in every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock for 9 months. She does not look up from the essays. She says, without looking, "You did." I say, "I did what?" She says, "You did see me walk in. I came in at 11:57. I stood by the window because I did not know anyone there. I read the menu card. You came in 7 minutes later with Marisol. I watched you cross the room behind her. I watched you go to the bar. I watched you for 40 minutes before you noticed me. I say, Ket. She says, I have been waiting 9 months to tell you that. I say, why did you wait? She says, because I did not want you to think I had been the one who decided anything. I wanted you to think you had decided. Men do better when they think they have decided. I say, you are very smart, Kate. She says, I am very tired, Henry. Bring me my coffee. I bring her the coffee. She takes it without looking up. This is the version of our story that we have inside this room. The version we tell other people is a different version. Marisol's friends ask how we met. Kate's cousin in Glasgow asks. The Dean of Arts and Sciences at Columbia asks at a fundraising dinner. The neighbor in apartment 4G who saw us coming home together one Saturday asks. The version we tell them is that we worked together on the spring symposium and one thing led to another. It is the version that goes down at parties. It is the version that fits in a sentence. It is also true. We did work together on the spring symposium. One thing did, in fact, lead to another. The real version is that on the 31st of December last year, two strangers shared one dance on the 20th floor of the Yale Club and made an agreement to never meet again, and 3 weeks later one of them walked through the door of a conference room and chose silence over the truth they had already made on the dance floor, which was that they had both wanted to see each other again. The pact was not broken at Tavern on the Green on the 5th of May when I stood up at her farewell dinner. The pact was broken at 4:03 in the afternoon on the 21st of January when Kate Bellamy walked into the Fairweather conference room and let me see her face. The pact had been broken before she set down her satchel. The standing up at Tavern on the Green was the part where one of us finally said it. I think sometimes about the version of us that kept the promise, the version that never came back to New York, the version that stayed strangers, the version where the elevator doors closed on the 20th floor of the Yale Club at 12:18 on the 1st of January, and the rest of our two lives carried on parallel and never touched again. I do not know if that other Henry was happier. I do not know if that Kate is somewhere in Edinburgh tonight thinking the same thing about that other Henry. I do not think so. I think the two of us in our other lives are both sitting in our own kitchens at 6 o'clock in the evening doing what we always did, and we are doing it slightly less well than we are doing this. But I am not certain. I cannot be certain. Charlotte Bronte would not have let me be. What I have come to believe is this. There are some promises you make to a stranger because you cannot yet imagine wanting them to stay, and sometimes the world intervenes through the carelessness of a department chair with a sabbatical to fill, or through a flu, or through a misplaced phone call overheard through a 4-inch crack in a door, and the world's intervention is the question you were not brave enough to ask yourself. The question is whether you would have asked her to stay if the world had not put her back in front of you. I think the answer for most of us, most of the time, is no. I think we have to be very lucky. I think we have to be more lucky than we deserve. Tell me in the comments. I get to every one. If you have ever made a promise to a stranger and meant every word of it, this is the channel where stories like that go. Subscribe to The Lingering Heart if you want more of them. Until next time, may your heart linger in love.